Mm-hmm.
And so maybe if we if we accept these mechanics of time travel, at least on a theoretical standpoint, maybe let's think about not time traveling. I mean, that's but the reason is not on a base level that everyone talks about. Oh, don't time travel because you'll mess up the timeline. No, don't timeline. Don't time travel because it doesn't matter. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter because you're gonna end up living a completely different life from your friends and family that you knew exactly. You're gonna. It's your choice. You could go back and live in the Stone Age if you want, but even if you go back to the future, that's going to be a different timeline that you now coexist with, hypothetically, and you just continue living your life anyways. There wouldn't be a point. You'd never be able to return to your exact timeline with your friends, your family. So you could be leaving all of those people as you once knew them behind in a world where you left and never came back. I wouldn't want to do
If
that
you,
to my
yeah,
family.
yeah.
Even
If you
if I
do come,
returned.
yeah,
Hmm? Go
yeah.
ahead.
If you do come back to your timeline, like to this to come back from the past, come back to the future to this timeline, will will everything like you raised up a good point. Like I don't like I doubt that everything will be the same the way you
No, even
left
if it
it.
were,
Yeah. You
even if it
yeah,
were
because
the
like
same, you're you'd be different. You'd be a couple minutes older, if anything.
exactly. Yeah, because like if you think about it, like would 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 your friends even recognize you? Would your friends even remember you, or the ones that are close to you? I mean, that's the big question right there too.
You don't know. That's part of the spontaneity of the universe. If we think about the Flash again, where he would go back in time, change something, then go back to the future, and some little things are different. Just like the uh, Hartley Rathway, the Pied Piper rogue. He came, he was alive and well and friendly. Little things like that where in the spontaneity of the universe and the spontaneity of the timeline, things are not necessarily going to be the same when you return. So there'd be no point in returning to the future. And
Mm-hmm.
similarly, let's say you don't go back to 1964 from your timeline. Let's say we decide to go to the future. All right, we're still going to one possible future future course of events. So you could go to the future 20 years from now. Let's say, all right, we're in. Well, you know what? Let's just say for ease of conversation, let's go to 2050. We go to 2050, and let's say it's a zombie apocalypse scenario. That's still one possible future. You cannot guarantee that that is going to happen, and so it wouldn't make any sense for you to go to the future because the future to see what's going to happen because that's not necessarily going to happen. It might happen in one possible scenario in which you left the timeline and went to the future. But if you then went back to 2023 to try to prevent that, you'd be going back to a new timeline because not the timeline that you, not necessarily the timeline that you left. It might be very similar to the timeline that you left, but it would still be operating on a different vibrational frequency because As soon as you travel back to the past, you're in a new timeline, because that past becomes your future, which cannot be changed by anything that happens in the past. So all roads lead back to the present. That's why we. That's why I like to talk about time travel, because it's fun. It's fun to theorize. Fun to think. Oh, what if we went to the future? What if we went to the past? But practically, it just wouldn't make sense. We'd be abandoning our past. We'd be abandoning our future. What kind of future would you make if you went back to 1964? That timeline, any changes that if you went back to the 40s and you prevent World War II, great, but that past is not going to change for everybody else. When you go to the future, that's going to be Back to the Future after preventing World War II or stopping it. That future is going to be completely different, first of all. And second, that change is not going to impact everyone that you know and love. Because you can't return to that previous timeline. You just can't. So there'd be no point. And so, what does that tell us? That tells us, at least it tells me, you create your own future. Just as Doc Brown said. Your future is whatever you make it. And that includes your past to some extent. We can't change the events and mechanics of our past necessarily, even if we were to time travel. Right? If you time travel back, you change something, that doesn't change where you came from. It doesn't change the memory of that past. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
I
That's
mean,
not
look,
how time travel works.
we would all be happy to go back and time travel back to the 40s and try to warn people and warn people about the Holocaust or trying to stop Hitler. But you know, at time, well, it doesn't change for everyone. Everyone's past in the 40s as well.
Right.
So, and how does that? And if we and it might like if we try to interfere, then then it could have some consequences. Maybe that World War II couldn't have ended, and maybe it could have had a different decision. Yeah,
Maybe. And
yeah,
all of these scenarios do exist because there's an infinite number of timelines. The multiverse is infinite. Some very small, minor timeline changes, and some major. It's all about coming to terms with our past in the present and creating our future moving forward. Because
hmm
that's part of why, even if time travel were to be invented today, even if we heard about it, we wouldn't be impacted by it. Because they would go back in time, change something in the past, but then as soon as they return to the future, they're not returning to our timeline. They're returning to the new timeline they created when they travel back to the past. So that's why we may not hear ever about time travelers coming to our timeline and warning us about the future. If you do,
right.
beware, because even if they do catch our attention, say a time traveler comes out and says, "Oh, in 20 years, we're going to have World War III. We're trying to prevent that from happening." The timeline that they came from is just one possible future, not necessarily the one that he came back and traveled back to. So it wouldn't even make sense for them to time travel back to our timeline. And if they did, realistically, don't believe them. Because we create
Yeah.
our own futures. And we interpret our own pasts. And that can really increase our presence, I think, at least for me, in accepting the present moment, accepting that I don't necessarily want to be in the future. I don't necessarily want to be in the past. Just be in the present. So that's where you create your future. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, you pretty much said it all. We got to be aware of the no matter how hard we try or how hard we're could have those opportunities. We need to be aware of the consequences.
Yeah.